But I hope you're well. I'm glad that we are together. Today, we're talking about supporting families under stress. And I know it sort of feels like maybe we should have done this a year ago, but who knows? It feels really important now, particularly in how our families are coming out of this season that actually many are experiencing lockdown differently and are really struggling actually with how it's going. And this is a really stressful season emerging from this. And so we'd love to talk about how you have supported families in the past, how you are supporting families, and how we can support families going forward who are really particularly under an intense amount of stress. Now, I just want to caveat, I am not an expert. I'm not a psychologist. I am just a family pastor who have lots of experience of working with families. And so I'd love to share a little bit about the ways I've approached it, not because it's perfect, but because we rarely talk about it. And so I will explain a bit about how I approach it and what I have sort of wrapped my brain around. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, your approaches, what you've run across to do this. So as I was making notes, well, first of all, I just love you guys. So please type in how you're doing, and it's good to see you and everything. So I'm trying a new setup, which is why every once in a while I'm randomly looking around because I'm doing it on my computer, which I've never done it that way before. I don't know where the comments are, so my team will send me comments as they come in. But it's good to see you. So let's get into it because not everybody has loads of time for lunch. And if you're anywhere near the north of England, it's sunny outside, and I want you to get outside if you can. So today, when I thought about talking about families and stress, when I started prepping for this, I ran into the wall, which I think we all run into, which is every family who's under stress is vastly different from each other. And that can be really hard to know when you're working with families because one family under relational stress in a marriage breakdown can be very different from a family under financial stress or family under behavioral stress from their children or just in dealing with we've just been through an appeal for a secondary school this or emotional stress. There's so many different, or in grief or in mental health problems, and it can be really hard to know where to start. And I wanted to just give us a little framework of being able to think through how we approach this stuff. You do not have to be an expert in the type of stress families are in order to be helpful, and I had to learn that through a lot of mistakes, I guess. I think I held myself back, particularly when I was new to it, because I felt like I needed to be better than who I was, or I needed to be the mental health expert, or I needed to be, really good at financial. I didn't feel good enough to help. And so I sort of stood on the sidelines waiting until I felt like I was an expert in that area before I waded in. And I think there's something really significant about those of us who are in children's or youth leadership or church leadership to be able to say, I'm not an expert in what you're struggling with, but my call is to hold you and to support you. And so I'm going to wade in to be helpful. How can I do this well? I think is incredibly significant. And so for me, it took a moment of boldness to say, I have the privilege of walking into people's stress and pain and fear and getting to exist in that space with them because I am not embarrassed by it and I am not ashamed of it and I am not in judgment on it. And there are very few people when families are struggling who feel bold enough to walk into it and say, I'm here with you in this. You are not alone. And I think that is something that God has called us to, and we can feel confident to do that, that it is okay. Um, uh, Sometimes we feel like we need to step back and give them space. And because sometimes we just don't know what to do. And I say, walk in. There's a privilege in it, and it's a call. And I just want to say, yes, do it. Um, Another thing that I found, started asking myself two questions when I deal with a family in stress. And I found this really useful. Because what my first questions when I initially started out was what practically can I do to help? So it became about tell me families who are in stress what you want me to do. Tell me what you want me to do, which essentially means that I place the burden, another burden on them. You're in stress. Fantastic. I want you to now line manage me and my help of you. And what happened was people would be like, I don't know. I don't know what I need. I don't know what I need. Or they'd suggest something that I can't possibly do. And I'd be like, well, I can't give you a school place. So I don't know. And I was giving them the burden of telling me how to help. And I found that that just placed something on them, which meant I never really got to help. So I began to learn to ask myself two questions of how I could position myself well to become useful to families who are in stress. So one of those is, what is being squeezed out in their life because of this stress that I can help give back? What is being squeezed out of their life because of this stress that I can help give back? Because what sometimes happened is that they were under intense financial pressure and they didn't have finances for anything. And what was being squeezed out for them was the family fun stuff, like the hey, let's all go get ice cream someplace, or the little financial freedom to buy a book for your kid, or to do the things that brought their family joy. And so I was busy trying to find them financial solutions to things, when actually what was being squeezed out of family life was fun, or was lightness, or was time to relax so that they could do that. It could be that peacefulness was being squeezed out of their family life. And so I could figure out how to problem solve, get restoring peace to them in a way that I could take some of the younger kids so that the parents could have time with the older kids to just sit and watch a movie. Or I could, or sometimes with financial stress, it was that they were losing a sense of control in their lives. And so rather than give them, financial advice, what they needed was more control over what's happening with them. And so what is being squeezed out that I can help give back became a really useful way of approaching parents, because then I could listen to them talk and listen to them be stressed and help find that thing that is being squeezed out that I can help restore in this moment without being able to solve the huge problem. And so asking that question was a useful one. Or what is the weight that is hampering their ability to cope? And so sometimes with families, every family has to deal with stress, but sometimes there is a thing that just is like in the way of their ability to cope. So I know with one family, they were struggling with relational difficulty between the parents. And normally, when you're dealing with relational stress, you have that ability to do that. But they just didn't have time to talk to each other. They didn't. They had 4 kids of different age groups with evening meetings, and the main thing that was holding them back from being able to do their normal marriage coping mechanisms was they just had too many kids in their face all the time and not enough time to themselves. And so what I could do is say, yeah, I completely understand that's really hard. How about I babysit once a week for you from after school till past bedtime, so you guys can have an afternoon and evening together once a week. And that massively impacted their family life, because I gave them time to talk and to laugh and to enjoy each other again. And I was able to wade into that. I didn't say, I think you guys should go to counseling and let me give you 15 things to do, because it's really important that you do that. You should go on a marriage course. What was being squeezed out for them was time together. And the thing that was holding them back was not having enough time. I can do that. And so by asking myself those two questions, that began to really help me orient myself better on where I as an individual and where us as a church can be placed to support families who are under stress. Because then if you're coming with financial situations, I know what questions to ask myself. If you're dealing with mental health issues, I can help deal with that. That doesn't mean we don't do practical support in the other ways, but asking those questions began to be able to help me find ways in. Yes, I'm trying to think. So, like financial stress, sometimes we found, with people in financial stress, we would try to pick specific things that they need. Oh, we can get you some food. But I found some people in financial stress are having so much dictated to them that what was being squeezed out was a sense of control. And so rather than sourcing food for them or sending them to a food bank, what we began to do was say, why don't we come over? Why don't you guys come over to our house and we'll cook a meal together? And so that rather than me dictate food together, I could buy the ingredients and they could come and cook their famous, chili that they loved, and we could sit around together and do that and send home lots of leftovers with them because they were missing community and they were missing a sense of control to eat the food that they loved and being able to be hospitable. They were feeling like what was being squeezed out for them was their hospitality. So I can do that. So there's so many different ways that you can do that. When you ask those questions, what we're doing is we're restoring to people what has been lost, and we're giving them companionship and teamness along the way. Yes, so I have lots of different examples of mental health or child behavior. I was during lockdown. There was a dad that I was working with. He just came to one of the courses I was running, and afterwards we were chatting and talking, and he was talking about the behavior of his children. He was really, really struggling, and there were some big issues in there. But in the end, it was just listening to him. He said, it's been probably a year since I've talked to anybody outside my family about the stresses that my family's under and my kids' behavior. And I thought, what, actually, I don't need to rush in with behavior solutions. This dad just needs someone to listen to him for an hour and say, you really are doing a good job. You know that? Because what was being squeezed out in his life was external affirmation. And I can give him that. So think about that question. What is being squeezed out, or what is the weight that is hampering their own coping mechanisms? And how can I minister to that? And the second approach that I find really useful in it is specific offers. I find families who are under stress struggle to find things that you can help with because it's all woven in. It is just all collapsed. I'm struggling with my mental health, which is impacting how I parent, which is impacting how my kid behaves, which is impacting my relationship with my partner, and it's all messed up. So you come and you say, what can I do to help? They're like, I don't know. And there's no, if they knew what you could do to help, they would have asked for it. And so this sense of being lost, and I find coming to them and saying, it looks like you aren't getting a lot of time to yourself. What would be most helpful? I could do the morning school run, or, maybe I can match you up with another family who could take home your kids from school, do the pickup and drop them off so that, if you're struggling with depression that day, you don't have to figure out how to get there or be late or call the school. What is that specific thing? Because often what happens is they haven't seen those possibilities of help, or even think that anyone would be willing to do that for them. Because it's a big ask. Sometimes you need a big ask, and that's a hard thing to properly identify what's being squeezed out in your own life, who could possibly help that, and who would be willing to. It can be massive, where you can tie them into those things. I'd love to, get you prayed for. I think that'd be amazing. Who, would you be willing for me to put you on a list of people who commit to pray for families in this church? Because we know it's hard. So offer really specific things once you know what's being squeezed out, after you've listened to them talk and sat with them and understood them, to be able to come up with specific offers. Often what happens is they may reject your 3 specific offers, but have another idea that bounces off of that you can say yes to, or that you can connect him to. But also I find really helpful to say there's no time limit on these offers. These are just ideas, but as you go through life and as you go through things, you may think, oh, that thing you offered 3 months ago, that might actually be useful now. And that offer is still on the table. It never goes away. You don't have to say yes or no right now. This is me saying, I'm here to walk alongside of you. We as a church are here to walk alongside of you. And these are some ideas. And you can say no 1,000 times. And we will still offer, because I always want you to know that there is this stuff if you need it. And so to give a specific offer with no time limit can be really, really, really useful to do that, because often people feel guilty that they're not coping. They feel guilty that they should be better. And to say, everybody needs this. I needed it. And this is when you can pull in those key tools too. When you're working with families in stress, to create windows into your life when you needed this and someone else was really significant in it. Or sometimes you need to frame for them. This is not, there are families in biblical times who are dealing with this. Throughout all of history, this is a relational stress that is difficult and hard, and you're never meant to do this alone. And that's why we're here, to speak that truth into it when we frame, or to catch those views of God that come up Often, sometimes families need help just theologically thinking through how to explain this stuff to their kids. We're losing our home. Your mother lost her job, and that's going to put financial stress. A lot of times, they're like, I don't even know how to explain that. And so sometimes the specific offer is, do you want some, an hour to sit and talk about, and you can practice explaining it to kids, and I can nod like, what do you need? What do you need help so that you can feel confident to do what you know that you want to do? I'm trying to get on board with your program of what you feel is important to your family, and I'm here to help that. It is not my job to come in and say, this is what I think is important to your family, so I'm going to problem solve this for you. My job is to hear your heart of what's stressing you out and to facilitate that. So I was working with one family who was under mental health and financial stress. And I discovered that the one thing that was being squeezed out and was really weighing them down was school shoes. Because in order to, she was really suffering from depression, single parent. And in order to have the finances to get school shoes and the emotional will to take 3 children school shoe shopping was just so hard. And that was her prime spiral of guilt was this whole thing. And so we talked to I talked to our support fund at church, and we were like, we could buy school shoes for this family. And I took the kids out school shopping. And that was, and whoa, I mean, what it completely changed for her, because that was the weight that was pulling her back. And it wouldn't have been anything that I would have thought on, but through those conversations and through just listening and waiting in, those can be really, really significant places. So I'd love to hear, what have you found interesting? What questions have come up in this COVID season that you have questions about, that we can maybe unpack this further, about how to support families in stress, whether it's financial, mental health, relational, child behavior, spiritually. What's coming up for you, and how can I help? So I'm going to do the pattern that we normally do, which is I'm going to pray for you, and then we'll wade into any questions, comments, concerns, ponderings, heresy flags that are coming up. So here we go. Let me pray. God, I thank you so much that we are privileged to be called into this space of holding families in stress. I pray that you would sweep away any fear that we have on our hearts for wading into these places. God, I pray that you would open our eyes to see families who are in stress. I pray that you would show us where you are in there. I pray that you would open the ears of our hearts and of our minds, that we may hear your voice almost overlaid over theirs, that as they talk and as we listen and as we learn, we may truly hear the heart of them and the cry. I pray that you would show us where to take steps and what questions to ask and what support to give. I pray that you would hold our hands to our sides if we're called to not do something practically, but emotionally. I pray that you would show us, just pinpoint, almost like words of knowledge of you, only that you know this would be an unlocking place, or this would be a place of peace for them, that we may be ministers of your kingdom into the lives of families, enabling them to cope with the stress that they are coping with, and that they may know they are not alone. Right. So a question, how to help during lockdown, has come in. Keep asking questions. We have had some families who have had an ASD diagnosis for their kids over the last year who are really struggling. I'm desperate to whisk their kids away for an afternoon to give them space to talk with partners. Just breathe. That's technically still a no. And it's still meant to be 2 more months before I have another family in my house. It makes me feel really powerless. How can we help now? Okay, so I am not an official on the rules of things. I have a big list. I did print out the whole thing of things, but I would really look at the rules, because I think from March 20th, I think 2 households are allowed to get together outside. If I am correct in that, I'm looking for my team to correct me on that. In which case, you can now whisk them away, because technically those are outside. And so I would suggest that you may want to put those dates in place ahead of time and say, oh, it's a couple of weeks. I'd love to do that. I'd love to whisk away your kids, to take them out, to give you breathing space. It may not be in your house. It may be that you even take them out in the rain or anytime it's sunny or something. But I think there are those things. But I also would encourage you to look at those support bubbles legislation, because I do know some churches who have looked at families who are struggling and looked at the child care support bubbles stuff and said, actually, with a family who's struggling, they need a support bubble, and to sort of look at that and see whether there's space in there for that, to have that support. But I think we're just at that phase. If we step into step two soon, I think we might be there where you can meet up outside for those times, and that might be really, really useful. I think the other thing is to just speak of hope. I found even with some families who are struggling, if I get a date in a month's time, that then makes them go, oh, it's only a month, we can have a countdown thing, and they begin to feel hopeful because there's something secure in the diary. Can be a really helpful thing to that. And sometimes it's just listening to them talk and asking them questions, to say, I just wanted to check in with you and drop by stuff, tell you you're doing great, and give them a place to voice their stress and their fear and their worries, and say, I'm so looking forward to being able to do this. It's just 6 more days. To feel that partnership can be a really significant thing. I don't know why I didn't have my details out, but yes, I think it's a great idea, and I think we're just on the cusp of you being able to do that. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, ponderings, heresy flags? The other thing that I think might be useful, now I'm coming back to this with this question, is I think also the question for me is, what is being squeezed out? For them, it's time. It also may be what is taking up their time that doesn't enable them to do that. So it could be that you say, well, you know what I'm going to do? Could I send you vouchers for Cook, or could I buy you a takeaway so that you don't have to cook tonight, and you and your partner can just like rest and talk rather than having to deal with dishes and meals? Is there any way that I can create internal space? Can I watch a movie with your kid online? Can I do something that can just create some space and create a bit of blessing? What else would do that? Can I do your laundry? What takes up your time and your mental space? That doesn't enable that. You can always come alongside that too. I go to a large church. I often hear of pastoral needs, but they are not people I know well or have existing relationship with. I'm also very aware I can't physically support them all by myself. Do you safely involve other people in doing some of the support? Absolutely. You cannot do that. I've worked for many large churches, and I'm like, I do not have the cape. Usually, if you're working for a large church, there are either a pastoral team that your senior leadership may have access to. They sometimes keep them very quiet and close to their shoulders, but you have that. You have home group leaders. You do have pastoral people to do that. And at one church I worked at, I did create a little pastoral team of people who I knew would be safe. And I talked to my senior leadership about it. And I'm like, I'm going to keep some pastoral people nooked in my corner for that so that I can be ready to deploy them. I took them through all the process. We did protection training with them. Just to say, there are families who pop up in needs, and I would love to be able to say, would you mind coming alongside this family and support? And often it was home group leaders who were like, yeah, bring them into me, tangentially connect them to my, home group, and I'll follow them up and do that, and we'll pray for them as a team. And so I have done that in a way that says, look, we need that. And often they don't need me, they just need somebody who's willing to check on them. Also, getting an older generation, the grandparent generation, are fantastic, because often their 2 children are in Australia and Canada, and they don't have a family to be like, I'll wait in and take care of you. And so to say, we have a family who is struggling and needs an extended family close to them. They don't have one. Would you be willing to pray with their kids and take them out to ice cream and cook for them, whatever they need to? Could you be a come alongside family for that? We began to pair come alongside families for them, and it was really, really wonderful. And that's something at a senior leadership level you can discuss who would be good for that and recruit them as if it's a team. But to say, it's part of the pastoral support of a church. And there are some families who are like, I don't want to lead a home group. I don't want to do anything huge. Can I hang out with another family who needs someone to laugh with? Yes, I can. And that has seen real amazing fruit from that. So I would suggest you do that you become the person who can listen, who can hear, who can help diagnose where you need that, and to pull in those people 100%. I think most of our church families go through this sort of stress a lot of the time because we live in a deprived area, and I'm only part-time and have a young family myself. Got any tips on how to juggle it all? No. I mean, yes, uh, I think we have to remember that our job isn't to pastorally care for every family that we run across. It is one, impossible, and two, overwhelming. But what we can get really good at is finding the opportunities within the stress. And so when you're in a deprived area and everyone is sort of doing that, you can't rush in and financially, sweep everything away. But we can make it normal. We can provide support for that. I know one church that worked in a deprived area that had a little team that prayed for all the financial stuff. And so if you were struggling with, not having or you're, well, I mean, some of these families didn't have cars, but, one family had a car that would die and then it wouldn't die and they needed it to get their kid to the medical appointments. And so they couldn't rush in and practically fix it, but they had a team that would pray. So for every universal credit appointment that they had, you'd have a little chain. Oh, I got called in. I need proof of this. And they'd be like, okay, we'll be praying for that decision. And there was a sense of ownership, that you are not alone in a financial void by yourself, but we are here. And so, let us know. I'll call and check on you every other week to say, how's the universal credit stuff going? Did you get to the food bank this week? Is there anything that we can pray for? Because we are with you. And that sense of championing them and finding what's getting squeezed out. If you're working part-time and you have a young family, I know some churches that are like, what gets squeezed out is the fun, is just the laughter and the relief and the difference. So they then just have like Friday morning parties where they had like 10 balloons and some biscuits, and it wasn't even a toddler group. It was just like, come have fun and laugh. And they like watched television programs together and they just enjoyed each other without any of the big performance and stress. It was just a time to enjoy and create fun, and would have, face paints or whatever they could manage to scrounge together, dress up days. And it was something that was really joyful. So finding what can be squeezed out that you can wade into can be really helpful. Having children, we have a comment coming in. Having children myself with ASD, don't underestimate the power of just listening and trying to connect them to a local support group in the area to meet other parents who can support them. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Another question, I was going to ask the same question. I'm not in a deprived area and often find the challenge of not talking about it at all or until well after the event. Yes, that can happen. Sometimes they're like, oh, I just, yes, 3 months ago I lost a baby and lost my job and it was awful. And you're like, why didn't you tell me about that? And that can be really difficult. Often what I find is then increasing my pattern of communication and the questions I'm asking. Because if I'm only getting, how are you? Oh, fine, 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 great. If I'm getting that, then I haven't built trust with those parents to tell me, and I haven't built patterns of communication yet that they know that I want to wade in. So one of the things I do is I up my creating windows so that they can see a normalized version of talking about myself. So when we talk, how are you? Great, great, fine, fine, fine. How are you? Actually, I'm stressed out a little bit because of this, and that's what's going on with me. And I'm okay. I'm working through it. It's all right. But there are some days where I don't want to get out of bed, and that's okay too. And after a couple of times of doing that, I will then find people going, oh, me too. Have you ever been in bed so much that you don't eat? And I'm like, interesting. And we begin to do that because often what happens is we appear perfect. And then we're saying, tell me the depths of your struggle. And it all of a sudden feels uneven. And if I want to wade into that, then I've got to create a culture where talking about what we're struggling with is okay. You don't have to be in extreme stress to talk to me about that kind of stuff. Or if I know things are happening, then I can notice things. So often I'll go, hey, I noticed that you guys, I haven't seen you on the Zoom in a couple of weeks. You okay? Just thought I'd call up and check on you, because I know sometimes it's because we're tired, and sometimes it's because something big, sort of knocked us sideways. How are you doing? And that's when I'll find out, oh yeah, we're okay. It's just my grandma died of COVID, and we're struggling with that, and so we just have been coping. It's like, oh, that's really hard. So sometimes it's the noticing bits. I've noticed your kid's been quiet in the midweek group, or I noticed you haven't been there, or I noticed that, you're looking tired and I just wanted to check on you. How you doing? And that can be really helpful to wade into that. Can you give any more suggestions for emergency foster care and parents not getting any support by social services? I think that this is a really good question, and particularly, I think Home for Good is excellent at training and equipping churches to do this. And so, if you're not connected with Home for Good, connect with Home for Good. But I think there can be something on a leadership level that is worth talking about. There was one church that I worked at that we had a very large amount of fostered and emergency foster carers and foster children. And we as a leadership had to really look at what that looks like for us to be a culture who supports that, because that requires a whole different ballgame when you're dealing with teenagers who had sexualized behavior and and big behavior issues. We've had some refugee children who suffered some trauma, who are acting out that trauma, and to sort of to deal with that. And so sometimes as a leadership level, we go, what kind of church do we want to be to offer that? Do we want to financially get on board with that? Do we want to educate ourselves on how to do support ties? And so if you're an emergency foster carer, we also are walking alongside of you in helping source baby material and other stuff that you could put out a call on a private Facebook page that says, I'm getting a 10-year-old. Does anyone have 10-year-old clothes? Can someone go purchase some stuff for us? So that you become a sort of mini team that supports these families who are living in that missional experience, to say, you have a group that you're not on your own trying to pick up your kid while also picking up the child from the social care and doing all of that. And so I've been in churches where we've made a little emergency response team to back up the families that were doing that. So you could say, "Oop, can someone pick up my kid from school because I'm picking up something?" And yeah, absolutely, we'd launch into gear. So I think there's ways of creating teams to support the family, to say you're at the coalface and we are your backup, so that you're not just on your own trying to source all of this stuff. Any suggestions for a family that moved to the UK during lockdown and had a new baby, now feeling very isolated as they've been here 10 months, but never still met other new moms? That is really hard. I think sometimes I'm trying to remember. Did the legislation come out that parents of under ones can form bubbles? I can't remember. Anna, I'm looking to Anna as if she knows everything. I think there's something sometimes it's just about loneliness, and then there's feeling of inadequacy and all of those things. And so now I think you can go for walks with one other person, I believe. And so it could be that you create almost like speed dating for walks, and that's something that two people can. I think two people can walk alone outside. I think Anna will shout me down if that's right. But rather than it just being supporting you, you could say, I'd love for you to get to know other moms, and everybody's taking their kid for a walk at 11 o'clock in the morning. Would you want to go on some speed dating family thing? And you can arrange a whole bunch of walking dates where they all walk their kids while they're sleeping and get to know other moms one at a time as you sort of circle them through, and to tie them in that way, that you're really about building those relationships so that they can then build on them and get to know those people with no expectation that you have to continue with that person to sort of do that. Yes, Anna's saying, yes, under ones. Families with under one are allowed a support bubble. And so that might be something that you could look at for that, to be able to say, we want to give you that. And you don't know those people, so let's play a little matchup of who I think would be great and do that, because that's so hard to do that. And if there's permission for it, run at it, because as they unlock, they can add more people to that as they go. I don't see any more questions. You have some. What I love about this is that it is so important that we feel confident in this and that we wade into this, because just these examples that you're showing me now, you're already involved in the lives of these families, and to really minister to their hearts. If we can fix the practicals, but also find what's being squeezed out. What are they needing to do? So like I was just thinking about that under ones, that mom with the family with, you could take them out with the babies, but you could also arrange for, evening walks or things where they don't take the baby and they just go out themselves, which would be fantastic. Or I know one family who said, she was an introvert. And so the last thing she wanted was to go out for a walk with another family. And so So what we suggested was that somebody comes and walks her baby. And so she like would come, and then someone else would be like, hello, and socially distance, and then they'd pass over the buggy. And because the baby was, gonna sleep, then no one had to touch the baby technically. So it wasn't breaking. And then they would just go walk the baby outside, and the mom was just able to be like, have an hour to herself because that's what she needed. She didn't need community, she needed time. And other times she'd just go sit on a bench by herself, and we just created time space. What is being squeezed out? How can I give it back? Is the question. But you're doing a great job, everybody, and it's so important. And often they don't know how to say thank you. But this is the essence of service, isn't it? This is Jesus' servant leadership, and I think it's really important. So please keep going. Please keep doing what you're doing. Please keep learning from each other and wading in and not being self-conscious if you mess up or don't know how to do it. Because if not you, who? And it's a real privilege to do what we do. So may God bless you in all of your work. Keep going. And this is something really significant and important. I know it feels unseen, but God sees it, and it's incredibly valuable for those families. So I don't see anything else popping up. So bless you guys, and I'll see you next month.